everything would implode and it would be like Mogadishu here within a few months. How you doing, guys? It's Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. I mentioned briefly on the most recent live stream how we're at a very interesting time with regards to everything that's going on in the world, because normally you would see that, you know, you have the kind of the accepted view among the different political groups, whatever that may be, for the future of like what's going to happen. And normally that would be like mostly cohesive amongst those political ideologies. And always there's some differences, you know, versus the different factions or whatever. But generally you have, like I said, an accepted mainstream view of that particular political ideology of what's going to happen in the future. The interesting thing about right now is no matter who you ask, kind of the predictions for the future, even the near-term future, are like all over the map. There is no like obvious way that things are going to go. And that's kind of scary because, I mean, on one hand, it means that any particular bad thing might not happen, even though most of the predictions are for unsavory things happening. But it also makes it the most difficult to prepare for, because we're talking about scenarios that could be completely opposite in what you would want to do to prepare for them, specifically when you're talking about financially. When it comes to physical preparedness, you really just want to do all the same things. You want to get all your bases covered in terms of resiliency without dealing with outside systems of support. So making sure you have food and water, making sure you have protection, making sure you have shelter, making sure you have medicine and tools and what, you know, fuel and power and whatever else you need to live day to day. That doesn't change. So when it comes to physical preparedness, I mean, every video I've ever made on this channel pretty much still applies when it comes to physical preparedness. So make sure you get all those bases covered. But when it comes to actually trying to predict, you know, socioeconomic types of distresses or problems, that's becoming a lot more difficult. Like what we should do with our money, what we should do to, like, maybe where you want to be in terms of what areas are gonna have trouble, whether that's within the country or whether that's talking about different countries. So hard to tell what's gonna happen. And I've seen a lot of people that I trust their opinion, and you know, they've been right about things before, disagreeing about what's gonna happen specifically with the economy. And it's hard to tell, and like I said, it makes a big difference in what we do to prepare. Like, if some people are saying you should hoard cash, other people are saying that cash is going to be worthless very quickly. So obviously, that would make a difference what you decide to do. Obviously, it shows also that diversification is obviously going to be your best bet as usual for avoiding the worst case scenario of losing everything. It is, you know, if you diversify across all the different options, you're guaranteed to have some of those options go bad for you, but it's almost impossible for all of them to go bad. And even for those people who think that this is all being controlled, like everything that's happening is being controlled in the way that they want it to, remember still that they would have to have some sort of system that they're going to be operating under for finances. So something is still going to be standing when all said and done. So finding out what that would be, even if that's what you believe, and that's not what I believe, that everything is being controlled. But so for my view on the subject, basically, and I think I've said this before in a couple other videos, is what I foresee happening is I don't think they're going to stop doing the tightening, whether that's raising the rates or quantitative tightening or whatever they want to call it, whatever you want to do, until they are given an excuse, basically. I've been, for years, been talking about how I don't think there's any way out of our current fiat system beyond a melt-up of the currency, basically. The exact form that takes is not necessarily going to be apparent, because I really also don't think that we will see like the true Weimar inflation where everyone's just buying stuff with barrels of money, so to speak. Obviously, it would be digital, but I do think the currency will die, and it'll probably, once that starts happening, I think that'll happen for a shorter period of time, and then they'll just try to switch to a new currency. So what I see happening is I see the quantitative tightening continue until they're given an excuse to switch. So that excuse could be internal from our own economy, by the stock market continuing to crash. I think they're going to ratchet up the interest rates slowly until the markets continue to tank. The economy starts to go into a depressionary spiral, basically, and even a deflationary spiral. But I really also strongly believe that our economic system, the current debt burden that we have from the government, and just the economy in general cannot function under a deflationary scenario where the money is literally disappearing. Because like I've mentioned many times, keep in mind that our money is debt-based. There's always more outstanding debt in dollars than there is dollars to pay it off. So if you start this debt implosion, then money is literally disappearing as debts are being canceled or defaulted on or even paid off. That's money literally disappearing. And the entire system is built on needing a continual expansion of the money supply. The government's spending significantly more than they're bringing in every year, to the tune of trillions of dollars. There's an outstanding debt of about $30 trillion that has an interest payments associated with it. So all that stuff would just continue to grow out of hand as the actual supply of money would be dwindling, which literally that can't happen. There'd be no way to pay the military. There'd be no way to pay police. There'd be no way to pay social services, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, local governments, any of that stuff. Everything would implode, and it would be like Mogadishu here within a few months if we allowed a truly deflationary scenario to take hold. So I am just adamant that I'd love to see the counterpoint to that, because I'm always aware that there's certainly things that could be missing from my viewpoint. I'm not an expert by any means, but I have been right before when all the experts were wrong, so I don't tend to trust them either. But I would love to hear from someone who disagrees with me on that, just to see exactly how they think that would play out if the government doesn't crank on the printing presses at that point. So that's my view on what's going to happen. Is we're going to continue to see that depression kind of take over, and in the short term we might see a lot of prices go down. Cash will probably be useful for a very short term period of time. And I say very short term, it could be up to a year or two. But then when it gets bad enough, when the government starts to basically run out of money, they're not going to stop spending. They just aren't going to stop spending. It's impossible. They would literally cease to have any power. They would cease to exist. All social services, military, police, everything would cease to function if they stopped paying for it. So they're going to continue to make the money. They absolutely have to. At that point, they're going to crank it, and that's when we get the melt up. Now, what I also don't know is what form that's going to take. Like I said, is it going to get to where a loaf of bread is $1 million, or are they just going to, before it gets that bad, switch over to a new currency, probably a central bank digital currency? That tends to be my expectation, is that would happen before we get to true Weimar levels of hyperinflation. But we will see the currency die. So it'll go to zero. So whether you can buy a loaf of bread for $1 million or $0 is functionally about the same, because the currency is worthless. So it doesn't really matter, and I think they will switch over to some sort of digital currency. I disagree with the people who say it's going to be gold backed. I just don't see them doing that. That gives up too much power. They're just going to revalue it. They'll chop off zeros like all these other countries have done, and rename the dollar to something else, make it all digital and act like it's different. Now, what I don't know at that point as well is what would happen to like debts denominated in dollars. Will they try to roll them over? Will they say, oh, guess what, everybody, your debts are free, we're starting fresh? Either one is plausible to me. And these type of vastly different possible scenarios are what I was talking about, to where, like, depending on what happens, your decision could be completely opposite. Like if they basically wipe debts clean, which I consider to be possible, if the currency's already died, then having a lot of debt, there's no reason to pay it off. But if they rolled over into the new currency and potentially even say now it's $1,000 worth of debt is now 1,000 Ameros or whatever the new currency is, that could actually amplify the amount of debt. I don't really see how that's possible. Certainly not in current legal standards. That wouldn't necessarily be possible because it's a different currency. But anything is possible when things get crazy enough. And obviously any outside forces could change this whole timeline. Certainly war is the big one. Anything that happens with China. I mean, if China, and I know I've said this before, I don't know why people even pretend like China couldn't just instantly turn this country into a wasteland, economically speaking. The amount of things that are made in China, or at least dependent on something that's made in China, is astronomical. Antibiotics alone, I think it's mostly the generic antibiotics, but that accounts for a huge portion of the supply. They're like almost 100% reliant on China for at least some stage of the process. If they decided to go to Taiwan and go take over Taiwan, and we acted tough and they really wanted to wreck us instantly, and then said, all right, not a single widget, item, anything is being shipped to the United States right now, that would just be like an instant death blow. And I don't care what you think, you're wrong about it, because we rely on them for absolutely everything. We don't even have like a lead smelting plants in the US anymore, as far as I know. If we do, we have like one. We are just so completely and utterly reliant on a massive trade deficit. It's disgusting, and it's actually treasonous in my mind to allow our country to be put in such a perilous position. But regardless, so that obviously could change everything. Obviously, a hot war of some kind, nuclear exchanges and whatever, could change everything as well. So it's really hard to see what's going to happen in the future, but that's my basic prediction for how this economic collapse is going to unfold. Let me know what you guys think, and specifically what I'd love to hear from is someone who has insights, not just thinks the opposite, but has a specific reason for why we would not see a melt up inflationary currency crisis, why we would see the opposite, because I just can't see how that would play out with our current economic and currency system. I just can't see how it's even possible. But I'd love to hear about it. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.